Hello and welcome to the Men's Human Rights Discord server. This is the weekly voice chat. This week's topic is very unfortunate. It is a very disturbing video and TikToker that I discovered, and turns out I'm behind the times because some of you have known about him for a while now. He's made a lot of very disgusting videos, but in particular, he's made this video here where he blames a victim of sexual assault for paying child support. And newsflash, this person is a minor who we're talking about. And I want you to pay attention to how he presents his argument, because this is the classic way the psychopath presents information. It's in a very twisted and disingenuous way where you don't really get enough time to link what he's saying together. Like, wait a minute, why are you blaming a minor who was raped for not wanting to pay child support after they were sexually assaulted? So let's watch the video and let's react to it. I do have to give an extreme warning if you are easily triggered by completely obnoxious and evil psychopathic people, then this would probably not be an enjoyable watch for you.
Not only are family courts not matriarchal, but pointing to the bias in family court decisions is another example of men telling on themselves. Let's start with child support. Do you remember this story about the juvenile underage father who got his babysitter pregnant and was forced to pay child support? Well, in doing the research for that video, I looked into why it is that courts don't take the means of conception into account when awarding child support. And the reason is that for decades, men have tried to commit fraud in court by claiming the conception was illegitimate in order to get out of paying child support. So much so that courts have decided that in order to protect the best interests of the child, they're no longer going to hear arguments about the means of conception. That's not misandry or matriarchy, that is the fair consequence of men's crappy behavior.
Okay, so let's stop right there. So that is misandry, and that's not a fair consequence for men's crappy behavior. The means of conception should always matter. And his reasoning that, oh, men tried to use it to get out of child support in the past is crappy behavior. It's actually not crappy behavior if a man was tricked into conception. Let's say a woman lied about using birth control. That's not crappy behavior on the man's part. So it is absolutely misandry. But notice what he's doing. He's finding an excuse to rationalize attacking a victim of rape. If you believe that an underage person having sex with an adult is rape, then that is exactly what he is doing.
So the other argument that gets used is around custody, pointing to the statistic that women get custody 65% of the time. But what's ignored is that 50% of that is because both parents agree the mother should have custody. 40%.
Which means that almost half the time they don't agree, but it happens anyway, okay?
Of the 50 states have a default custody schedule of 50-50, with, unsurprisingly, Republican states dragging their feet when it comes to giving dads more time. But let's take a look at one of the states where 50-50 isn't the default, such as my home state of Texas, where men get awarded 33% of the custody. So the default order in Texas is every other weekend, which if you're doing the math equates to about 14% of the time. But the average is higher at 33%. And that's because this is merely a default. You can request a different schedule, you just have to ask for it. And it looks like in Texas, about half the time men are indeed asking for 50-50 schedules. But half the time, they're totally fine with every other weekend. And we know that's the case because in 90% of cases, they're
Okay, so let's stop there. So first of all, notice how he has to browse to the very, very top of the list to make his argument. Secondly, how does he know to what extent men are actually getting how much they're asking for? He's saying, well, 14% is the default. That's a terrible amount of time for the default. So men are fighting against such a biased system. Maybe they're only able to achieve 33%. So he's saying that, well, men are able to beat the default, therefore that proves that there's no misandry at play. But the default starting position is really, really bad. The default starting position is every other weekend. The fact that they're able to kick that up to 33% is not indicative that the court system is fair towards men. The court system is extremely biased against men to begin with, and men have to fight to double the amount of time that they're given, and that's still not even 50%. So when he says that this is men telling on themselves, it's quite the opposite. This is feminists telling on themselves of how they either don't understand the issues or lie about them. Let's keep going. But you see how he presents it as if what he's saying is a rational argument, when you stop and you unravel it and deconstruct it, you can see it's really not. It's the opposite of that.
settled without a judge intervening. Both parents agree on the custody schedule. So this isn't meant.
But men are agreeing to the custody schedule that they have an option to agree with. They're taking the best that they can. That doesn't mean that they're satisfied with it, and that doesn't mean that it's fair. So yeah, men may agree with it after fighting to get the very best that they can, but even after that, it's still not a fair system. And here's how I know that it's true. He's pointing out how in all these default states, it genuinely goes to 50-50, which means that fathers are not arguing against getting 50% of the time. So why is it then in Texas that fathers are suddenly settling for 33% of the time?
And not getting awarded what they're asking for. This is men straight up being okay with taking less custody of their kids.
No,
how does he know that?
It's not men. Yeah, how does he know that? How does he know that's not men taking the best deal that they're given?
Yeah, not only are family courts not matriarchal, but pointing to the bias in family court decisions is another example of men telling on themselves. Let's start with child support. Do you remember this story about the juvenile underage father who got his babysitter pregnant and was forced to pay child support? Well, in doing the research for that video, I looked into why it is that courts don't take the means of conception into account when awarding child support. And the reason is that for decades, men have tried to commit fraud in court by claiming that conception was illegitimate in order to get out of paying child support. So much so that courts have decided that in order to protect the best interests of the child, they're no longer going to hear arguments about the means of conception. That's not misandry or matriarchy. That is the fair consequence of men's crappy behavior.
Right, can we stop it there, please? Right. He's saying about the Hersman versus Sayer case where the young lad was abused by his babysitter and a child was the end result. What he's actually also doing is blowing the whole abortion argument straight out of the water, because he's saying that the means of conception doesn't count in these cases. Well, if that's the case, then a child born through male or female rape cannot be considered by the courts, which is something else entirely. Just another form of rape apology. Yeah, I mean this guy is beyond. He really is, and there is no evidence to suggest that the courts have made this decision based on what's best for the child, because what would be best for the child is not to have contact with its mother, because she is quite obviously not a very nice person, and forcing a young man who's just turned 18 to not only pay child support but have to pay back child support on a child that he never wanted in the first place and he wasn't old enough to consent to having, is just utterly ridiculous. And I also, going by this guy's accent, he's not American originally. He sounds British to me, and I'm ashamed that we share a nationality.
To add to that, I despise the way he's using the language. Notice how he's saying underage juvenile father. That's a lot of words for molested child, if you ask me. That's just like trying to sugarcoat it. Another thing is he got his babysitter pregnant. I don't think he's the one who got the babysitter pregnant. I think he's shifting the blame from Shane Sayer, the victim here. Shifting the blame from the mother onto Shane Sayer, which is pretty fucking disgusting, if you ask me.
Also notice the blood guilt. This is something I really want to keep picking people up on, because the basically collectivist blame, this is something that he really seems to like, and he really goes whole hog on it. You notice how he says that men are all to blame for men's crappy behavior, and so every male, even children, share the same guilt. They're all tarred with the same brush. And it would be disgusting even if these men were all crappy men. But he's actually, as Blue said, taking a lot of very innocent men and victim blaming them. Victim blaming is something that he seems to do quite a lot in this video. He's victim blaming them and he's redirecting the blame onto them. It's this little boy's fault that he was raped, is what this guy is saying. It's his own fault, and it's his fault that the courts are set up this way because he is male. This is a man who seems to delight in self-flagellation. He seems to delight in tearing other men down with him, and it is gynocentrism. And I think that if he is accused of sexual assault or some other impropriety, I will not be shocked, because he seems the sort. In fact, I would say his stance is almost pro-child abuse, to put it mildly.
I was just about to say
He's using arguments.
I was just about to say he's a Me Too accusation in waiting.
He is. Yeah, you can smell it on him. Just the way he's arguing, it's like, yes, I've got to whip all men. The whole ex-patriarch name in itself smells of this kind of look at how wonderful I am, look at how, virtuous I am. He is virtue signaling, basically, to the feminists by tearing down men and boys and young rape victims as well. And it is disgusting. I really do think that his stance is actually borderline pro, if not actual pro child abuse, because he's literally blaming the victim. And blaming the victim is exactly how these people operate.
And what's scary is to think that this guy has dozens of videos that gets tens of thousands of likes. This is how feminists manipulate people, not into even being a feminist. This is directly attacking the men's rights movement, because this is suggesting that these issues are not misandry, therefore the arguments of the men's rights movement are invalid. And he's getting tens of thousands of likes. And people like this are psychopaths, and they are absolutely relentless. So they have to be addressed. They have to be directly confronted. These kinds of takedowns have to exist. And this is just one video of dozens that he has. And people like this, they are willing to do this full time without break, and they never get tired of it.
And unfortunately, TikTok takes down our content because it is actually, TikTok takes down any content which is pro-civilization and pro-society and which builds society up. Their only interest is in propagating chaos. So it's very much in line that this guy is being promoted on TikTok and that he's being shared with all these people.
One thing I want to add is, like, if you look at the comments, none of them stopped and thought, hey, he's victim blaming a little boy that got raped. None of them do that. None of them stop and think, wow, this guy is apologizing the rape of this little boy. None of them do that. Like,
Because
it's disgusting.
None of them see that little boy as being a human being. That's why they've completely dehumanized him. And obviously, a couple of us were talking earlier on about certain people in history, and they were able to achieve what they achieved through dehumanization.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we have another one. If you guys can stomach it.
So Joe here is a victim of SA who was understandably upset with my video where I talked about victims of SA having to pay child support due to court guidance, where they ignored arguments about the means of conception due to what I said was the rightful consequence of men's crappy behavior, that behavior being that they had consistently lied about the means of conception in order to avoid paying child support. And while I understand why that would be upsetting or triggering, I went on to explain that this is not something I agree with, and that in a prior video I had called out that decision to make victims of SA pay for their child support as unjust and something that needed reform. But despite that, Joe's...
Hang on, we just watched a video where you talked about a minor who was raped, and no, you did not say that. Unless you're talking about a different video, which we didn't see, in which case you have different standards on different videos, but you did not say that, and we just watched the video. We just watched it, and you are lying. You spent the entire time shaming the victim. So what are you talking about? And again, going back to what I said the first time, he says it's a, quote, consequence of men's shitty behavior. But again, if the means of conception was because of sexual assault, or was because you were lied about if a woman was taking birth control, then why is it crappy behavior to argue the means of conception? Wouldn't that be logical? Doesn't that make sense? Let's keep going.
Videos continue to say that I think that male victims should be ignored or not listened to, and the same for child victims, which is not what I said at all. So that's why your ass is getting blocked. But before we do, let's just deal with this, since this is something I've heard a couple of times from men's rights advocates. So I'll treat it as a good faith argument, even though we both know that this is not a good faith argument, and I'll explain why. But let's assume you have a problem when it comes to allegations of SA with people who are lying, getting away with it, and the injustice that causes. False allegations make up less than 10% of all SA allegations, and those false allegations have a much harder job trying to climb the evidentiary bar necessary to get beyond reasonable doubt. Talked about it in a prior video, and it's estimated it maybe affects 2 people out of every 1,000 allegations, 0.2%. Meanwhile, if 10% are false, that means
We
So
don't know
already,
because we don't
go
know
on.
because false allegations are not ever prosecuted as false allegations. They're usually prosecuted as something like perjury, which is lying to the court. There's a big difference.
And of course, he's using the less than 10% statistic, ignoring the fact that there are many, many studies that say completely higher figures. I've seen figures anywhere from the 2 to 8% that feminists say to 40% or more. So his argument, once again, relies on the assumption that the stats the feminists use most often are the stats that are inherently true. Second, then he was saying this affects 2 out of 1,000 people, which is an absurdly low figure.
This is interesting
usually-
because the feminists will argue the opposite when you talk about rape stats, and they'll say, "Oh no, this is underreported. It's massively underreported. Like
Right.
victims can't come forward because they're terrified, and so on and so forth." But then they go, "No, it's less than 10%." Well, we know it's actually more than 10% from family court statistics. Because
and as Mike
when you
said-
take a false accusation to the police, they don't prosecute it. They refuse to because the feminists tell them it will hurt female victims.
So the entire, even if it's true that on paper less than 10% of accusations are false, we know that the paper itself is wrong because not all false accusations are recorded. Not all false accusations are reported to the police. And there are men who are innocent who get convicted. So if an innocent man is convicted, where would you have reported and recorded the false accusation? You would have recorded it as a proper accusation. So there's so many problematic issues with how he's talking about false accusations and information. But let's keep going.
And that doesn't also, just to add real quick, it doesn't, I've started reading about this, take into account the amount of plea bargaining which happens within the court system, both civil and criminal, that makes many people choose to plead guilty because they believe that if they don't plead guilty, they're going to get an even worse charge or life in prison or whatever.
That's very common too.
over 90% are true, making men 9 times more likely to lie about not committing the SA. Which is why I say this is not a good faith argument, because if it was, and you were really concerned about people lying and getting away with it, you'd advocate that we don't believe men long before you'd advocate that we don't believe women.
That's absolutely ridiculous. So he's saying, in effect, what he's saying is that we should be more concerned with the fact that criminals try and lie about committing a crime when they're caught than people being falsely accused. Well, of course criminals are going to try and deny it when they get caught. Of course a rapist is going to try and lie about it. That's not something that we have to make a concerted effort to worry about. That's something that we can assume. We have to worry about collecting evidence and convicting a rapist, not worrying about is the rapist telling the truth. Of course the rapist isn't going to tell the truth. Why would they? We need to worry about finding rapists and convicting them with evidence. We need to worry about, is the accusation true? Is the evidence strong enough to convict this person? Because if they are guilty, they should be convicted. Let's carry
But
on.
as I tweeted today, actually, there are reasons why a rapist would be very, very open about being a rapist. And that reason is if they're a female rapist, because there's
they're
no
what?
consequences for that. If they're a female rapist, because there's no consequences for it. Like
Like the
I've
female
tweeted
rapist
today.
he defended in the beginning. On the last video, the
Yep.
female rapist he was defending.
The one who's getting
carry-
money for being a female rapist.
So let's
Can we
carry
just
on.
run through 2 seconds, Blue? Can we just run through a couple of things that Pokemon has been putting up?
Oh, sure.
Okay. One is he's in bad faith, holding a viewpoint only to score misandrous brownie points and subsequently claiming to abandon it to get the moral high ground. Yes, definitely. He's defining false allegations as in court-proven malicious allegation, proving malice in court as extremely hard. I think that's one that you pointed out. Excuse me, Metahuman. There are many ways to hide malice, like claiming to mistake the identity or claiming to be distraught or irrational. And Wikipedia even contradicts a definition that feminists use. A false allegation is a claim or allegation of wrongdoing that is untrue and or otherwise unsupported by facts. Yeah, so thank you for those couple of comments there, Pokemon. Appreciate that, as always.
If you
Bruce, wanna
notice,
continue?
Brent actually brings this up. I think you're still in there. If you notice, Brent actually brings this up in a way that contradicts what he's saying, in that he mentions that these are actually court-proven allegations, if I recall from the video that he's going with. And that is, there is a major difference between court-proven and like the actual body of accusations, as feminists will tell you regarding rape, because they'll say that like only 10% of rape is actually proven in court, but like there's another 90% of rapes that never get proven in court, never go to the police, and they will use that argument to say, yeah.
I was about to say, look at Brian Brown. He was convicted of a rape that never happened. Now, how is that recorded? Because the woman who made the accusation and later admitted to lying has never been prosecuted for it. The only thing she might be facing is civil action to recover the money that she was given.
She probably won't be, because the money that they get given is theirs to keep forever, generally speaking. There was a big in the UK where this woman accused 10 different guys of rape and sent like a couple of them to jail for a few years. And she was getting a hell of a amount of money for it. The only way she got caught was she was bragging about it. And why wouldn't she? Like, everyone was rewarding her. Anyway,
Okay.
let's go on with the next part of the video.
All right.
But this isn't about any of that. It's simply about turning it around onto women, because you want to turn this into a gendered war because you figure I'm doing the same against men. It's what you fail to understand about feminism and its allies and the patriarchy. Both men and women are capable of upholding patriarchy's crappy values, and I have called out behavior from both genders on this page. But when you take that gendered war against women and you say that it's men's rights advocacy or creating a safe space for men, you do harm to everybody. And it's why compassionate, empathetic men like me will continue to ignore you and block you, because we see it for what it is. Disingenuous arguments to perpetuate a hatred.
Oh my
Did you
god.
hear him?
Third
Did you hear
place
him?
credit because you're motherfucking.
I'm ladies, feminists, I'm the nice guy. I'm the one. I'm chosen. I'm special. No, mate, what you are is a Me Too accusation in waiting, and I cannot wait for the day it happens. I cannot wait to see you being taken on camera in cuffs, accused of rape, sexual assault, or something else. Yeah, and as Pokemon is saying, he's blaming men's rights activists for the gender war. No, we turned up late to it. It already started long before we got involved.
Compassionate
people
men
like-
like me.
It's
And let's
people
talk
like
about
him
it. Let's
that
talk
make
about
the
it.
gender war. It's people like him who make this quote unquote gender war, supposedly. By
Yeah,
pulling
and let's talk about his
bullshit like
argument. let's talk about his argument. So he's saying that MRAs are waging this gender war against women because we're pointing out things that happen to men. We're pointing out issues that affect men and boys in this case. So therefore, we are acting in bad faith and we are waging a war against women. Now, of course, his argument is going to be, well, the issues that you're presenting aren't really issues, and my video just explained why. And that's the problem with this guy is his explanations are not wrong. His explanations are lying. His explanations are calculated. They are intentionally misleading. Notice how fast he talks. He doesn't want you to stop and think about what he just said the sentence before. This person is a manipulator. This person is disingenuous. This person is putting on an act, and it's very obvious.
He's a narcissist. He's a
psychopath.
narcissist.
He's a
Look at what
psychopath.
he's saying. Oh, compassionate, empathetic men like me. Oh wow, man. I could have never. Oh, jeez.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna put a link. We should link this in the video. I'll put a link to it in the comments. But we need to start being more proactive in directly confronting these people and directly making these kinds of videos and directly responding to these kinds of videos. Because if they go unchecked, they can keep their lies for as long as they want.
Thing is, Blue, we all know what he's going to do. He's going to just block because he won't want to put up with receiving a counter argument from
I
anybody.
don't care if he blocks. We're not making this video for him.
No, I
He's a
know we're
lost
not.
cause. I don't consider him worthwhile anyway. We need to reach the masses with this.
Yeah. We're probably going to have problems with people saying, well, patriarchy this and patriarchy this and men that and men something else. And, this is the same as that, relationship coach or whatever it was. He's just going around on TikTok and he's been caught out on multiple occasions having affairs behind his wife's back with his fans that he's meeting at events and what have you. I can't remember the guy's name now. Black guy over in America. He's been caught so many times. It's unbelievable. I tell you what, Blue.
Oh, Sneeko?
No, it's not Sneeko. He's not on the red pill side. He claims he is, but he's not. He's not even a pickup artist. He's just an absolute creep. Blue, could you go through the comment section on the video we were just watching, please?
Women, and we want no part of it.
Rav, turn the video off. I don't want to see the video anymore. Let's go through the comments. Because I think that would be worth doing.
Oh, the
They'll
comments
certainly
are
be fun.
awful. The comments are awful.
This one here from Babylon Jasmine. This one I like.
It is true.
False allegations have historically
It is
been
true.
almost entirely against black men. Taking that into account, changes statistics. Yes, absolutely, yes.
Black men get.
Well, no, be careful with
exonerated.
that because if we go by that, then that means we should assume an accusation against a white man is almost certainly true.
No.
Not
But
in the sense.
historically speaking, we only have to look at Emmett Till to know this. But
It's been worse for black men, but not almost exclusively reserved for black men.
Absolutely,
It's not
but black
exclusively
men.
reserved, but the point is that black guys have had it throughout history.
No doubt.
Mainly the worst. And so, he's not even counting that statistic when he's talking within that video at all.
Oh no, I get that. I understand, but I want to not emphasize that it's almost all against black men, because now when you have an accusation against a non-black man, we would be making the argument that it's probably true and should be considered true, when that's not the case. It was worse for black men, but by no means exclusive for black men.
Oh yeah, that is 100% true. But black men do get exonerated more than any other race of men in the U.S. justice system. They get the most exonerations for SA accusations ever in the justice system. So that's something to look at.
Okay, real quick, this one from Solvig. Can you make a video about how most of these false accusations are not actually false? Surprise. Most of them are. It's called a false accusation for a reason.
That's why 2 to
And
8% is so dramatic. Jesus.
yeah. Human suggestion.
Yeah, I mean this Solvig is using group guilt exactly the same as he's doing. Just reading through the comments, it's just. I notice he uses hashtags like toxic masculinity. The guy's a muppet.
Notice that there are some people who just like repeatedly keep showing up, and it's like the same people who are saying, "Oh, false accusations aren't real" and stuff like that. And they're trying to claim that men who fear false accusations are irrational. Men have every right to fear false accusations because they're so
Yes.
prevalent today.
Yeah,
And
I've been falsely accused.
yeah. And that's another issue too, is people only want to consider false accusations after the fact. And they never do the same in cases when it comes to when someone is accused of rape or of anything else. They immediately just say, "Oh, the criminal, the rapist," even though nothing's been proven yet. Well, it's also hasn't been proven that this guy hasn't done it either.
Mm.
So you can't really call him that as well. And no, it's not, invalidating or, I'm trying to think what's the word for it, Mike. You might have to help me out here. What's the other word they use?
Not sure, to be honest.
Not invalidating. It's like
It is
another word they
invalidation.
use for saying like the victims are like being, scared away. That they use a lot. If you try to say, "Oh,
Does anybody want to see his video on MRAs and false allegations?
No. To be quite honest with you, because
I do.
I value the equipment that myself and my partner have worked very, very hard to buy.
Or the one called, or we could do the one called MRAs Don't Tell the Whole Story.
one sec, Ma, if we start swearing on here, please just accept it."
Which one?
It's
That's the-
okay. I get it.
Which one, guys?
We're actually past the part that YouTube actually checks, so which is surprisingly short. But go on.
Sweet.
You want to do MRAs and false allegations or MRAs
No.
Don't Tell the Whole Story?
No. He's gone after Miss Fanny Adams, Miss FA.
Oh yeah, the Fanny Adams one right there.
Yeah.
Our mothers
one?
more likely abuse their children. It's right there. It says our mothers more likely.
Oh yes,
to
I
abuse
see it. Okay, I'm gonna start
Click
it.
it. Ooh.
Hey Brent,
Hey, Miss Fanny Adams.
I'm actually within the psych field myself, so I have a good grasp of the literature. And I feel you've been remiss in a few areas.
Well, fantastic. Always appreciate the opportunity to learn. What do you have for me?
Big thing that you have failed to do is define what child abuse is. We know that self-reporting measures are open to bias, retrospective bias, and all.
These are both great points, and she also asks where I got my data from. So the data comes from a prior video I did where I covered how it is wrong to say that women are more likely to commit abuse because that does not take custody into account.
Oh,
Now, there is a
Jesus Christ.
different National
You
Child Abuse and Neglect data
asshole.
system, and it does indeed account for physical, sexual, emotional abuse and neglect. So we are covering all the bases and taking into account the kinds of abuse that different genders are more likely to perpetrate. So what about retrospective bias? This idea that accounts of abuse long after they've happened.
So I'm guessing the implication he's saying that the total numbers of women are more abusive than the total numbers of men, meaning the total number of mothers are more abusive than the total number of fathers, but that's only because mothers are in a better position to be abusive because they're more likely to have custody. Now that's interesting because that would imply that women do get custody more than men, even if they are
Yes.
abusive. So he's making the suggestion that men don't want custody even when the mother of the child is abusive. He's essentially, in a roundabout way, making the accusation that men don't care if mothers are being abusive. So when you start piecing different pieces of this guy's channel together, and when you start piecing different videos together, you can see how everything he says is a lie. Everything he says is disingenuous, and he contradicts himself 4 videos, 5 videos, 6 videos down the line. That's why he does these short hit and run kind of attacks. So I would have to look at his video where he quote unquote explains the statistics on why the reason mothers are more likely to be abusive is because they have custody more. But even if that's true, he's disproving his other point in the previous videos. So people should be able to see through what this is. This is an act. This is a lie. Let's keep going. Now, that's Mike. Did you have something you wanted to say about it?
No, I'm trying to find things to not throw.
Not to say. Okay, so let's
Just
let's
go.
carry on.
I personally like it how he sets himself up in the beginning as a super reasonable person by like the jaunty tone and the way he's doing that. So it makes you think that he's going to be reasonable, but actually he's not.
Just
are unreliable. So 2021 study that looked at cohort data found that claims of retrospective abuse lined up with children who grew up in households with environmental harms, which is where we'd expect abuse to occur. So it kind of adds credibility to those claims. And a 2004 study into retrospective abuse claims found that rather than being a high number of false accusations of abuse that never occurred, what they found was a substantial rate of false negatives, where people had forgotten or blocked out or failed to mention abuse that actually occurred. The child abuse data system doesn't rely on reported accounts of abuse. It relies on CPS investigations and their conclusion. So retrospective bias doesn't apply to this data. But we can agree that relying on retrospective accounts of abuse is unreliable, and we shouldn't do that to draw our conclusions. So what evidence do you have that women are abusing children more?
Maker Hallen Coulson in 2005 did a retrospective prevalence study of...
Wait, a what kind of study? Retrospective? Didn't we just... Never mind. What did it say?
And they found that mothers were more likely to physically harm their children than fathers. Mothers at 49% and fathers at 40%.
The study doesn't say that. Here is that study by Major Hallen Carson, and here is the line that you're talking about. And what it says is the person most often responsible was the mother. And what's the problem with then concluding that that means moms are more likely to commit abuse?
But this doesn't take into account the fact that the children most likely spent more time with the mother.
And when you do take custody into account, you get the very comment that you're replying to and taking issue with, that men account for a third, or in the case of this UK study, 40% of abuse, but only have 20% of custody, putting kids at 3 times greater risk of abuse when they're with their fathers. And yet, despite knowing all of this, you're in your own comments saying things like this. They are drastically lower, 3 times lower than what they should be. And while I appreciate you holding me accountable and making sure we take care of bias, the bias you should be concerned with is that you don't hold yourself to the same standard.
So again, he does the same kinds of tricks. He says, well, 49% of the time that women are responsible and 40% of the time men are responsible, but men are more likely to commit abuse because men are less likely to have custody. So therefore, when you look at the actual rate of abuse next to the rate of custody, you would see that men are more likely to abuse their children. Did this study look at where the abuse was happening from single parent households or divorced households? Was this study looking at if this was going on when both parents were still in the house? Was it taking into account all those factors? Because if it wasn't, all of its conclusions are absolutely non-scientific. The only thing that this study did conclude, though, is that 49% of the time, the abuse happens because of the mother. 40% of the time, the abuse happens because of the father. The abuse is more likely to happen with the mother than the father. So if custody isn't an issue, like he claims in his other videos, this shouldn't matter, because whether a child is with his father only 2 days every 2 weeks or 50% of the time, the abusive parent is going to be abusive at one point or another. It doesn't matter whether they're with that parent 70%, 50%, or 20% of the time. That parent is either abusive or they're not. So it doesn't matter that men are less likely to have custody of their children. If they're going to be abusive, they're going to be abusive. Whether it happens now or 2 weeks from now is irrelevant when you're looking at a study looking at long-term data sets. The opportunity is enough.
This is an extremely good point.
So
Extremely good point, Blue.
This is why people are able to use what I call pseudo math to fool most people who don't have a grasp of math or statistics. The dirtiest field of mathematics by far is statistics, because it is the easiest thing to twist and the easiest thing to lie about. Saying that men are more likely, or 3 times as dangerous because they're more likely to abuse their kids, and the way he proves that is by showing that, well, men are less likely to have custody, is completely irrelevant, because the parent doesn't just have one opportunity to abuse their child. It's not just the one weekend they get, and if they don't abuse their child that weekend, that's it forever. If they have 52 weekends in the year, they could abuse them 4, 8, 12, 24 of those weekends. So the amount of opportunity that you have has nothing to do with which parent is going to end up being more abusive. Just because you have less time with your child doesn't make you any more or less abusive. That's not how math works. So the study showing that women are more abusive, women were responsible for the abuse 49% of the time, and men were responsible 40% of the time, doesn't work unless he is admitting that men never have custody of their children, which still doesn't actually work, because it still wouldn't change the fact that the abusive parent is the one who decides to be abusive. And there is always a point, pretty much, where a parent will have an opportunity for abuse, because it's almost never zero. So
Let's actually
again,
steel man this.
he tells on himself. And most people don't have the math background to understand this, so he makes these quick hit videos, and they sound good to people that don't understand, and this is how he gets support. This is how he twists arguments and makes false narratives, and it's just infuriating. And this is why people need to study math. Sorry.
Yeah, let's actually steelman this though. Let's assume he's right, and that the reason that women abuse more is because they have custody more. Right, let's equalize the custody, and we assume that because it's equal, the abuse is equal. Well, that just means women are still equally as abusive as men, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't win away.
Yeah.
What this is just a pissing contest. It's just looking at numbers, who's more abusive than who. It kind of just defeats the purpose of trying to protect children in the first place. You're not actually looking at solutions or preventative measures. You're just trying to hold dirt on one gender, and then just try to demonize one gender for the sake of the other. What are you doing here? You're not helping any children. Also, it lacks a lot of nuance. A lot of his videos lack a lot of nuance. If we're talking about abuse of men, or abuse of children by men, okay, sure. But men don't have an entire court system made to give them custody 70% of the time in some states, or made to give them custody 50%. Or made to give them custody a lot more than the other gender. The difference between men and what makes women maybe a higher risk is that they have a system that grants them custody more. Let's say that men are more abusive, for the sake of argument. Let's say that men are more abusive, all right? At least men don't have a system that gives them custody more than women. So the point just kind of falls onto itself. And he admits it. He says women get custody more. Well, shouldn't that be a problem? Should we change the way custody laws work?
Blue, you got an advert there. Watch out for your YouTube there, sorry. Yeah, you've got to be careful. Anyway, I do think that he's told on himself again quite strongly, in that he's made another argument which sounds an awful lot like he's trying to support abusers. Because if he's arguing for something, he's arguing for the women are wonderful effect, essentially. And he's saying, yeah, women are wonderful, women wouldn't abuse their kids. And then that sets up a situation where people are mentally thinking women don't abuse kids. And so they are less wary and less observant when it comes to women. Their guard is down, and therefore more women are going to get away with abusing their kids. More police are going to overlook it because it's just something women don't do, etc., etc. He's putting these ideas in people's heads. He is actually promoting rape culture, and not just rape culture of adults, but of children. This is what he's doing. And honestly, Michael Flood does it too. Michael Flood has made these same arguments. I don't know if most of you know who Michael Flood is, but he is a key Australian feminist, and he does make these arguments too. He has made the exact argument Brent does about child custody. It's quite a common one regarding child abuse. That basically that women have more custody, therefore it's skewed that way. He's said that before. A lot of feminists on Twitter have said that, and we need to call them out on this. We need to take what Blue has said and remind people that even if like men only get one weekend a year, that's still their chance to abuse the kid if they are an abuser. But it's that still ticks that box. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think this has been a really good stream, and I don't want to ruin it by going on too long. So would people like to end it here?
Can do. I think I'm just angry
Okay,
at the
then.
moment, to be honest.
All right then. Dark, if you take us out, please.
Hello? Yeah. Okay. Oof, this was an episode. And if you see Mike and I breaking a wall later, don't be surprised. I'm joking. Can I just point out real quick though? I'm looking at the video that he put in the little stitch to Miss Fanny Adams. I'm looking at the original video, and in the original video, she was talking about a comment he made on one of her videos. And it's funny because he's trying to make it seem like women, moms don't make up the majority of abuse. But he literally said in his comment that she's answering to in the video, others account for nearly 1/3 of abuse. So we're saying mothers make up the other 2/3? And then continue saying, but have 1/5 of custody, making them far more likely to commit abuse. So his comment that she's answering to in the video in this stitch that we just saw, his comment is the complete opposite of what he's arguing in this video.
Right. He does things purposefully disingenuously. He doesn't not realize that what he's doing is self-contradictory. He does it on purpose. This is what people need to understand about people like this when you debate them. You're never going to change their mind because he is not wrong. He is lying. There is a difference.
Yeah. But just thought I'd point that out real quick. Mr. Moms don't abuse more, and then literally his comment that started the whole argument was basically proving that they do. But anyways, this has been a very passionate Saturday chat. We are here every week at 7:30 UK time, which is 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern. We always love having you guys. We love having these kind of discussions, being open and talking about it, criticizing content, whatever else. Remember, if you ever have a topic that you want to recommend or something you want us to look at, you can always message Men Are Human, M Painter, Blue Orange, or myself. We will see you all next week. This was a great chat.